Hey guys, this is Hannah from Wilson and Frankel Studio, and today I'm going to show you how to make these water droplets on a colored background using my wonderful watercolors brush set in Procreate. I find it super beginner friendly, so whether you are new to using realistic watercolors in Procreate or you're just looking for something new to do, this will be something very fun and helpful to follow along. So let's go ahead and get into it. So the first thing we want to do is add our paper texture. This is what's going to give our artwork that realistic handmade appearance. Once we've added it, we're going to size it to the canvas, and then we want to change the blend mode. I usually go for linear burn. You can also do multiply. I also like to duplicate the canvas. I like the appearance of my canvas texture to look a little bit more defined. So now we're going to add a layer below the canvas texture that we've inserted, and then we're going to use the watery background brush. And then just go ahead and start layering it in. The lighter that you hold your stylus, it's going to add more water to the canvas. So it's going to kind of blur those edges out a little bit. If you press harder, you're going to get those more defined edges that you can kind of see there in the left. And you can layer this as many times as you want. Once you get to a point that you're happy with, we're going to create another layer on top and go to the brush library, and we're going to select the wet on dry brush. I've selected a very dark purple, and we're just going to make a bunch of random shapes here. It really doesn't matter. You can make whatever you want, make them as big or as small as your heart desires. To get even smaller shapes, you can make the brush size even smaller. Whatever you need to do, you can add as many as you want. Once you've added the shapes that you like, we are actually going to go to the eraser tool and click it again and make sure that you have realistic painter selected. And we are basically going to just erase the majority of the inside of each bubble. I like using the realistic painter for this erasing because, like the watery background brush, it's responsive to pressure. So if you use a lighter touch, you're going to get very soft edges, but if you start pressing harder, you're going to get a more crisp and defined edge. As I get to the edges of the bubbles, I lighten up the pressure that I'm using with the eraser just because I want those gentle edges touching the edge of the bubble. And you may want to go over the erasing part again a couple of times. The brush itself is transparent, so it won't be a solid opaque erasing the very first time that you go through it. So you'll see here that I tend to go through a couple extra times. Okay, now we're going to go back to our paintbrush, and we're actually going to select the exact same one that we're using now. So we'll go to the brush library again, and we're going to select the realistic painter. And once we've done that, we're going to create a layer above what we've just done. And I'm just going right to pure white. And remembering what I said before about how this brush works with pressure, I'm just going to start kind of layering in some highlights here. So going very lightly around the edges, pressing a little bit harder in the center where I want the brightest of the highlights. And you can kind of go around in different parts of the bubble using this brush. I'm working from a reference, but again, with any water droplet or bubble in real life, light refracts in different ways. So even if you're just kind of doing this freehand without a reference nearby, it's totally fine. You can just play around and do what feels right for you. Okay, and now On a layer above what we just did, we're going to go to the gouache detail brush, and I'm going to choose a very similar dark purple to what I used before. And we're kind of define the sort of edges of the bubble. So just with a very light touch, just kind of draw in along the edge there. We're adding the light from the background refracting onto our water bubble here. So I'm kind of just choosing generally one side of the bubble to keep this on. You can be a little bit more free and easy with it if you want, but I'm for the most part keeping all of those lines on the right side of all of my water droplets. And now on a layer above what we just did, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to keep using the gouache detail brush, but now we're using pure white, and we're going to add those bright highlights along the edges here. For these white highlights, I am sticking mostly to the right side of the water droplets, but I'm definitely going to be a little bit more loose with where I'm putting them. So occasionally, like right here, I'm going to add a little bit on the left side. I might even stray away a little bit from the sharp edge of the bubble and put it a little bit more closer to the center. So I'm pretty happy with how this looks, but I want to add a bit more dimension to these water droplets. So I'm going to do that by selecting a darker purple once again, and I'm going to return to my realistic painter brush. I'm going to add a new layer, but I'm actually going to move the layer below the highlight layers just because I don't want to lose that brightness that I already have on top. And just like I was doing when I was creating the bright highlights, the brush is pressure sensitive, so as I reach the edges of where I want the color to be, I'm going to lighten up that touch and make those edges nice and super soft. And you're just going to go in to a couple of different places throughout each water droplet. All this does is just kind of bring forward the background a little bit. And like I said, it's adding another layer of dimension, and it gives it a more realistic appearance. All right, so the last thing that we're going to do to the bubble itself, we're just going to add those finishing bright highlights. We're going to keep using the realistic painter, and we're going to go to solid white, and we're going to make a layer above everything else we've done. And keeping in mind what I've said about the realistic painter brush, it's pressure sensitive, so pressing hard like I am here is going to make the colors more opaque. But around the edges, I'm going to lighten my touch and just kind of soften those edges. Like I mentioned before, I am working from a reference image, so that's where I am basing where to put all of these highlights. But don't fret if you're not using a reference image, or if you're just kind of following along with what I'm doing. Just do what you think is going to look best. There's no wrong way to do it. Perfect. So the last thing that we want to do is create a shadow along the edges of the bubble on the background. So creating a layer above the background color that we did, we're going to keep using the realistic painter brush, and then I am going to select another nice dark purple. And then starting with a nice light touch, just start going around the edge of your water droplets. I'm choosing to work on the right side of each water droplet, and I'm going to use a lighter touch on the edges like I have been before, just to soften everything. And this you're going to want to layer up a couple of times. So now you can see here I lifted up my pen and am putting it down again to create kind of another more defined layer. And don't worry if you get a little bit of the color inside the bubble. We're going to go in and clean it up after we're done Right now, I just want to make sure that I get the shadows laid down where I want them to be. Now that we've done the shadows along the water droplets, I just want to go in and clean up any spillage that happened. So I'm going to use the eraser tool with the wet on dry brush and just go in and run it along the edge of the inside of the bubbles. It's kind of imperceptible. I don't see a whole lot of spillage that happened from the ink that I was using, but I just like to do this to be on the safe side. And I use the wet on dry brush because it's a little bit of a firmer edge, but it's not completely opaque where it would be completely noticeable that I erased something. And we're done. So that is how you can make these water droplets in Procreate using my wonderful watercolors brush set. I actually love doing this project a lot. It helps me when I'm facing some creative block. While I did work from a reference today, it's something so fun and simple that you don't have to work from a reference. So if you just need to sit down and chill out for a little bit, this is super fun, takes less than 10 minutes just to kind of work out any kinks that you've got going on with your creative block. Thank you so much for watching. I always appreciate the support. Leave this video a like and subscribe if you liked this tutorial, and shoot a comment down below if you have any questions. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.